quote from a mob movie.
Because if you don't do that, once you're in court, now you just can't leave.
Katie's Snapchat picture, I've been saying that there was somebody in the background here wearing red shorts. Carter, who trains in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And by Warren's own admission, his brother put someone in an armbar. Pretty unique bracelet. Unique like the bracelet that Bart Jr. was wearing in that tattoo picture. And right here looks like it might be the tail end of a tattoo that wraps around the forearm.
When a boat takes on water 10 miles offshore, panic is not a choice. It is a physical law. In a 22-foot Triton, with a failed bilge pump and the Gulf of Mexico rising over the gunnels, human beings do not sit calmly. They scramble. They bail. They drop to the floor to find the leak, to grab the life jackets, to pray. The physics of a sinking vessel demand chaos. But according to the official narrative presented by the friends of Nolan Wells, that chaos never happened. We were told the boat was taking on water, but we were also told that nobody was on the floor. Nobody was scrambling. Nobody was panicking in the small space of the hull. It is a claim that defies gravity, defies logic, and defies the raw video footage of the distress call itself. Because when independent investigators slow that footage down, frame by frame, the official story fractures. A limb flies up from the deck when the tow strap goes taut. A body is somewhere beneath the sightline of the camera. And the young men sitting in front of the interview cameras suddenly stop breathing, their eyes locking onto an unseen handler off screen, waiting for permission to speak. You're watching the Black Docket. We track active cases, we follow the evidence, and we do not look away when the digital breadcrumbs lead straight to a lie. Today, we are handing the microphone to the independent investigators who have spent the last 6 weeks doing what the Jackson County Sheriff's Office refused to do, enhancing the photos, tracking the jewelry, mapping the boats, and holding the official timeline up to the light. If you're new here, subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. Now, let's look at the tape. Before we dive into the pixels, we have to establish the baseline, because you cannot understand the weight of a single red pair of shorts until you understand the story they are trying to hide. Nolan Wells was 18 years old. He was a wide receiver at Southwest Mississippi Community College. He was 3 weeks away from turning 19. He didn't drive, which means every single day, his friends picked him up. It was a habit built on trust. On July 4th, he got on a boat with those friends and rowed 10 miles out to Horn Island to celebrate the holiday. It is the most ordinary thing an 18-year-old on the Mississippi coast can do. He never came home. For 6 weeks, the public has been fed a very specific, highly managed narrative. We were told the boat took on water. We were told Nolan chose to stay behind to talk to a girl named Katie. We were told his friends left him on the beach at 4:30 p.m., assuming he was safe, only to realize hours later that he hadn't come home. We were told this by the young men themselves, sitting beside a high-priced defamation attorney who quoted mob movies, threatened the internet, and laughed at the camera. We were told this by a sheriff's department that declared no foul play before the autopsy was even finished. We were told this by a system that handed a grieving mother a sealed report with 2 words: undetermined. But while the attorneys were busy issuing televised ultimatums, a different kind of investigation was happening in the background. Independent investigators, people with no legal authority, no subpoena power, and no PR team, were downloading the raw files. They were adjusting the exposure on blurry photographs. They were cross-referencing the seating charts of the boats. They were matching the jewelry on the wrists of the people in the background. They were doing the actual work of justice. And what they found in the pixels completely dismantles the official timeline. They found a limb on the floor of a sinking boat. They found a fighter in red shorts on the wrong shoreline. They found a unique bracelet on the wrong wrist. And they found a brother named Brooks driving a boat that wasn't his. We are going to walk through these 5 critical anomalies right now. We are going to let the investigator show you exactly what she found, frame by frame. And when she finishes, we are going to hold those pixels up against the legal reality of this case and ask the questions that 90 minutes of televised interviews never once touched. Stay with me, because the pictures don't lie.
I mean, he's on the phone. Wouldn't you think that you would have seen Nolan on the bottom on the floor or something? Or scrambling around, or everybody in a pot, like in a small space on the boat looking at him or something. I mean, that you.
What an absolute wild thing to say when so many people have seen this video and slowed it down and noticed that there's either like a hand or a foot or something that comes flying up when they tug on the toe right there. Like, I can't believe that they said that. But please, please, please put out this interview. Please give me something to tear apart. Y'all, I swear I see Warren stop breathing when he starts this sentence, and he doesn't move again until he closes it out. Watch. They try to cover it up with an edit.
On the phone, wouldn't you think that you would have seen Nolan on the bottom of on the floor or something, or scrambling around, or everybody in a pot, like in a small space on the boat looking at him or something? I mean, that.
Let's go through a speed run of the information. We can now definitively say that this is Jax. We can also now definitively say that this is Morgan. He's wearing the same hat as well as the same bracelets. So where were they on the Triton? Now that we've got a much clearer video thanks to Officer Tatum, it's obvious that there is nobody in an orange swimsuit or a paisley swimsuit on this boat. We also barely see that there's somebody here in the red shorts. Now, in this Katie Snapchat picture, I've been saying that there was somebody in the background here wearing red shorts. So I pumped up the exposure, and as you can see, it certainly looks like it. They seemingly have similar body types as well as similar hairlines. We also know that whoever was in the red shorts was also on the shoreline when the fight broke out. Now, who was involved in that fight? Warren's brother, Carter. Carter, who trains in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And by Warren's own admission, his brother put someone in an armbar. And in case you don't know what that looks like, go ahead and look at that placement on the back of the head there. Spot look familiar? Given Carter's height, build, body type, this looks like it could be him. But one blurry, underexposed picture is not solid proof of anything, right? But we know Warren grabbed his younger brother and had him come over hang out with them on their boat as they were sinking or whatever. And it would be pretty bad for their case if this was Carter on the Triton and then on Katie's boat at 6 o'clock. But now my attention turns to this person who a lot of people think is Bart. But in his hand, he is holding a cell phone. So I thought, why would Bart jump from his boat to the other boat holding a cell phone when other people have cell phones in their hands while Wyatt is on the phone in the picture? So while I was trying to compare pictures of Bart to the person on the boat that I can't identify, I found this picture with him with a tattoo from about 2 years ago. And it wasn't until just today that I stopped looking at the tattoo and I started looking at his wrist. Because someone in the background of this picture has always stuck out to me because my instinct always was like, is that Bart? Bart seemingly has a pretty pronounced mullet as according to this picture. But this was definitely not on Bart's boat. I checked the seating and the covers, like it's not Bart's boat. Now I think you pretty much get where I'm going with this because then I remembered this bracelet. Pretty unique bracelet. Unique like the bracelet that Bart Jr. was wearing in that tattoo picture. And right here looks like it might be the tail end of a tattoo that wraps around the forearm, right in the same place that it would be on Bart. I've said for a while now that the story about them calling Bart that morning to go out on the boat never made sense, because what 21-year-old didn't already have plans for 4th of July? So then the question is, who is driving Bart's boat? Which brings me back to this guy who some people have thought looked like Bart. However, we do know that he was on Bart's boat handing out drinks to people in that 7-second clip we've seen. Same hair, same glasses, same hat. By the way, did y'all know that Bart has a younger brother? The family resemblance is very striking. I mean, the real difference is that he's a little bit shorter and has a squarer jaw. And does anybody want to guess what his younger brother's name is? Brooks. Now, I seem to remember, and I can't remember exactly the context, a certain somebody talking in an interview about his buddy Brooks. Here's your reminder to check out my bio if you want to support my work. Folks, I have really outdone myself because I'm sure you're here wanting my take on part 2 of the interview, but we're not going to talk about that. Trust me, you're gonna want to be sat. Thanks to this interview, I was able to finally, definitively put faces and names together, and then it hit me. We now know for sure that this is Jax, and now we know for sure that this is Morgan. He's literally wearing the same hat and the exact same armbands. So why aren't they on the Triton? A very unique blue swimsuit and an orange and yellow swimsuit. And now, thanks to Officer Tatum, we finally have a very clear video of them calling for the sea tow, and I don't see an orange swimsuit anywhere. I don't see a paisley swimsuit anywhere. So where are Jax and Morgan on this boat? We see what looks like Jax cuddling up to Katie on Bart's boat. So is this Bart over on their boat? Because here he was in that video handing out beers from his boat, and the sunglasses and the hat look the same. But what if it's not? Just stick with me, I'm going to come back around to it. Because now I want to talk about Warren's 17-year-old brother, Carter. Carter, who we know got into a fight with someone and put someone in an armbar on the shore. Carter, who Warren said he told to come over and hang out with all of them and chill out. Carter, who practices Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Notice the hand placement. And if you're like me, I had to go look up and see what an armbar exactly is and how it is done. And oh, look at the placement of that arm. Yeah. Now this seems to me like it definitely could be Carter. Picture was just taken in December, so the haircut, the hairline, the body type, all of it. We also know that the person in the red shorts were on the shore when the fight happened. Now, y'all remember this picture, the Katie Snapchat pictures? Well, I brightened it up. All I did was just pump up the exposure, nothing else. And look in the background here. Oh, red shorts, just like I said. Lighter colored hair with a very familiar looking back of the neck. Now, of course, I'm not saying whether this is or isn't Carter. Boy, this wouldn't look good for anybody if this is Carter on Katie's boat at 6:02. But you know, one underexposed, blurry picture a smoking gun does not make. Unless somebody with a very unique haircut and a very distinct piece of jewelry happens to show up in one of these pictures. Because Mullet Boy here has always bothered me because for some reason he's wearing what looks like jeans. Not saying they are jeans, just can't definitively prove one way or the other whether they are or not, or if it's just the design of the swim trunks. When I went back through some of the photos I had collected of Bart Jr. to try and figure out if this was him or not, I found this picture I had archived. Thanks to the tattoo in this picture, which is the reason I screen grabbed it, that's why I'm like, I don't think this is Bart, because I feel like I would see the tattoo there, but and mind you, this picture is a couple of years old, but I just kind of wanted a timeline for this tattoo for identification purposes. And then I stopped getting distracted by the tattoo on his arm, and I looked at the bracelet on his wrist. Pretty unique set of bracelets, right? I mean, hopefully by now you've figured out where I'm going with this. Why, what a unique set of bracelets! So between the mullet and these bracelets, someone may come to the conclusion that Katie and Bart were on a boat together. Maybe not Bart's boat, because after all, they're claiming that this boat belonged to a Marty McGrath, who was the one who came and got people. But if that's Bart here, then who was driving Bart's boat? Did you guys know that Bart has a younger brother? Very similar looking, but I'll tell you what, very different jawlines. Almost like the jawline of this person on the Triton. And guess what his brother's name is? Brooks. Now, where have I heard that before? Hasn't somebody talked about my buddy Brooks in previous interviews? I always said the whole "we called Bart that morning" story didn't make fucking sense. I have a theory that I'm fleshing out. But thanks for doing this interview, guys. Wouldn't have been able to figure this out without you. But you know, since we're all liars and grifters anyway, just a reminder to everybody to check out my link in my bio if you want to support my work. I told you that lawyer was giving away the game when he kept saying just their three names over and over again. What do you mean it's a quote from a mob movie?
Because if you don't do that, once you're in court, now you just can't leave. Now you just can't leave.
Maybe if you're trying to convince the general public that these boys are innocent, don't quote a mob movie in which they then beat up a bunch of bikers at a bar. And it seems quite obvious to me that this lawyer, instead of, presenting evidence that would help exonerate them in the public eye, like showing the actual security cam footage of when they came home or the text messages with Katie. No. Instead, we're going to keep it focused on race, which you can see by this clip.
People are pushing the narrative of, oh, this is a race thing. Well, obviously it's not. I mean, this is like a brother to us. I mean, Nolan's no different than anyone else in our group. I think it's so criminal that they took something so anti-racist and flipped it into something super racist. Like they took, this is the definition of anti-racism. I mean, that we did not look at Nolan any different than I looked at him, or even you.
Okay, first off, that even you was wild. It's quite clear from that sentence that Jax has never had an actual conversation about racism in his entire life. I was friends with a black person. That's the most anti-racist anybody's ever been. This situation was the most unracist thing that's ever existed. It's the media. They're the ones making this racist. No, you don't understand what that means. It means your story doesn't hold water, and when people called you out on it and called out the investigation on not even investigating, that is systematic racism. It's very, very clear to me that the lawyer is the one telling them to keep the focus on race. Because you can see the lawyer and the gears in his head turning and nodding and agreeing along with all of the racial stuff. And you can see him kind of being like, yeah, okay, that's what I'm saying, yeah. So it's very clear that that was one of the bullet points that the lawyer told them to hit home over. And another one was the Coast Guard. Why would I call the Coast Guard if I knew he was dead? I called the Coast Guard right away. First off, you didn't. You waited till 11 o'clock. Second, it's not like the Coast Guard searched for him that night. Warren clung to that like it was a safety raft.
I think from the beginning, I'm glad that I called the Coast Guard. It would have been completely different. I'm glad I called the Coast Guard.
It's like, I'm sorry, Warren, but it's actually way more suspicious that you called the Coast Guard. Because first, you didn't want to call the Coast Guard when you guys were sinking. And then for some reason, you assumed that Nolan was still out on the island at 11 o'clock at night. Why wouldn't you assume that he came back with the person he was supposed to come back with and something happened to him in transit? Because no reasonable person would think that he was still out on the island, in my opinion. Because in your own words, Warren, you said you didn't talk to Katie till the next day. And then speaking of the island, the lawyer tries to say that by them going to the island and looking around, that it absolutely exonerates them and that the narrative couldn't be this, and ends it with a wild statement, mind you.
People who have been sucking up way more oxygen than they're entitled to have not been to the island. I'm willing to bet that a lot of the hustlers and profiteers and liars have not been to that island. And you have to go to that island. And being at the island today was revelatory. It was really illuminating. It's a very dynamic marine environment, first of all. But when you go to the island, you see instantly that what some people want to be true, what they wish to be true, they're trying to wish it to be true. They're trying to make it true through their lies. It's actually not possible. It is a very, very long and narrow barrier island. It's basically very low sand dunes. And the particular part of the island that we're dealing with, there are no trees. It's hardly any foliage, hardly any tree cover, hardly any plants, and it's wide open. And on July 4th, there were thousands of people there. There is no possible way that anybody could have committed a murder in broad daylight.
Murder? Who's saying anything about a murder? Most of us are under the assumption that an accident happened and they covered it up. All of this stuff that they keep trying to point to as evidence that they didn't do anything to him are not actually evidence. You know what is evidence? The security cam footage. Explain to us why the grandfather was the one who canceled the sea tow. How about that? And what I see is just a complete lack of responsibility with these boys. Because listen to this phrasing.
I wish we would have never, I think about this every day. I wish we would have never went out on the 4th of July because I know this wouldn't have happened.
You see, instead of saying, I should have made sure my friend got home safely, they said, I wish we had never gone out. And I have to admit, my little antennas buzzed a little when it sounded like he was going to say, I knew this was going to happen, right? That seems like what he was going to say. It wasn't, maybe we shouldn't have been underage drinking. They literally say, we did everything right.
I mean, there's not much I would change from my point of view and my friend's point of view. I think we did everything right, and I know we did nothing wrong.
Those are not the words of somebody who lost their brother, their best friend, a month ago. And I lost one of my closest friends in a non-suspicious way. I blamed myself, even though I hadn't even physically seen her in a couple years. And for those of you guys saying that Jax is the one that people should press, I fully disagree. He is the one that I think is the scariest out of these interviews. Watch the way he looks at Warren during this moment.
We live in a very tight-knit community, and for people to, push back and say these things when they know what Ocean Springs is like, it's really hard. And I mean, I haven't had many personal encounters, but I know being around the
Oh, he felt like he was saying something to Warren. Because let's not forget, it was his grandparents' house that they all got together at. It was his grandparents' house that they went back to and thus should have security cam footage from. And out of all of them, Jax is the one that is holding his body in a different way, who is more controlled, more level-headed. If these kids were truly looking to exonerate themselves, they would actually start addressing some of these questions, like, who was the fourth boat? Why were all of you huddled up out there together? Who drove the fucking Palm Beach? Alright, let's try recording this video for the third time. First off, what in the cosplay was this lawyer doing? As if he isn't a lawyer from New York. He's just throwing on some good old boy dog whistle clothes. What I've seen so far, this was a weird interview. From the baseball signals he was giving, watching these boys as if he was their warden, and wearing a hat advertising the law firm that you're working with is weird. But this lawyer kind of proved my point a little bit when I suspected that he wasn't going to be a very good lawyer and just was actually a bully behind the scenes. Because did y'all pick up on this?
About Morgan, Jax, and Warren, I'm not going to call them untruths or half-truths or falsehoods. I'm going to call it what it is, lies. Morgan, Warren, and Jax left the island at about 4:30 p.m. That's it.
Yeah, did anybody else pick up on him constantly repeating Morgan, Jax, and Warren? Morgan, Jax, and Warren are innocent. Morgan, Jax, and Warren left at 4:30. That language is intentional. He is intentionally excluding all the other people on the boat, all the other people that went to the beach. And you might notice he conveniently left out the brother in all of this. Aren't you also representing his brother? And yet you intentionally say stuff like this.
Morgan, if you lied about Jax, if you lied about Warren, we're going to get you. And you're going to be hauled into court. You're going to be held accountable. And it's going to be very painful. And what I would say to the people who have done that is, now's your chance. If you want to apologize and retract before you find yourself in court, you should probably do that now. Because if you don't do that, once you're in court, now you just can't leave. You won't be able to get out of it. And we're not going to name names because there's some other folks who are doing that, and we want to be better than that. And I want to emphasize this, right? We're not here to guess. We're not here to speculate. We're only going to deal in facts, right? And here's the most important thing, right? We don't know how Nolan Wells died. No one here is saying we know. But what we do know is Morgan, Jax, and Warren had nothing whatsoever to do with Nolan Wells' death.
Did you see it? Did you see how they intentionally left out so many people? And I thought he drowned. It was an accident, right? Isn't it weird how in none of these interviews they're ever like, this was an awful accident. We should have made better choices that day and looked out for our friend, but in the end, he drowned. And can we just talk for a second about the weird laugh they did there? Let's show it again.
If you don't do that, once you're in court, now you just can't leave. You won't be able to get out of it.
What the hell was so funny about that? That was the mask slipping, y'all. That's how they really feel about all of this. There's no logical reason a lawyer would actually advise any of their clients to go and keep doing these interviews, because this is all just a media PR stunt. They know that they're never going to be held accountable, but they are just so worried about their name being Googleable that they're desperately trying to send up the signal to try and revamp their public image. This whole interview, in my opinion, is just the lawyer doing what I thought he would try to do and bully and intimidate people into silence. Because as someone who has gotten several cease and desists in my life, they don't give you warnings. They don't tell you, oh, you better retract it or else we're gonna then get you to court. No, a cease and desist is your warning. A warning that means nothing. Personally, I don't think there's gonna be a single person that they ever bring to court for defamation. And if anything, this lawyer repeating over and over just Morgan, Jax, and Warren implies that what he's actually saying in lawyer speak is that these are the only three with clean hands. Which is why, again, it is so weird that his brother is not included in this list. I've got a lot more to say about this interview, so I'll be making another video today for sure. But one thing I need to say is, if you really want to keep coming on here and proclaiming your innocence, why don't you actually show us the evidence that you claim that you have? Show us the text messages with Katie. Jack's buddy, go ahead and show us that security cam footage of all y'all coming home. Feels like that would be the most definitive way to shut us up, now wouldn't it? Until you do that, nobody feels bad that you can't buy a fucking Gatorade. Nolan is dead. My bad, folks. I've got to re-upload the video because I accidentally left something in it, so I had to re-edit it. But here we go. Let's try it again. This was the most bizarre good old boy cosplay I have ever seen in my life. Let's keep keep in mind that that Trump lawyer that they hired is from New York. And I have never seen a lawyer sit down with their clients and do an interview with them in the least professional attire I have ever seen, while also advertising another law firm on their hat. We all saw how weird this interview was, right? It was like a prison warden keeping checks on them. And not only was he doing the weird baseball signals throughout the interview, not only was he in the most defensive position out of anybody in this group, after I watched this interview, he kind of proved me right in that I think he's a bad lawyer who's using bullying tactics behind the scene, and that's what he's good at. Because did anybody else pick up on this?
About Morgan, Jax, and Warren, I'm not going to call them untruths or half-truths or falsehoods. I'm going to call it what it is, lies. Morgan, Warren, and Jax left the island at about 4:30 p.m. That's it.
Did anybody else pick up on that? That over and over again, he was specifically saying Morgan, Jax, and Warren, blah, blah, blah. They didn't do anything. They left the island at 4:30. If you're telling lies about them, you're in trouble. He's intentionally and purposely omitting everybody else that was on the boat, everybody else that was in the group that day. And that right there is very telling to me. Now, I personally do not see the logic in the lawyer advising these boys to do another interview, unless it's to try and threaten and intimidate the people that they're gonna go after for defamation. Because they keep saying this over and over again. We're gonna sue for defamation. We're gonna bring these people in and we're gonna sue them. And at one point, the lawyer even says this.
Morgan, if you lied about Jax, if you lied about Warren, we're going to get you. And you're going to be hauled into court. You're going to be held accountable. And it's going to be very painful. And what I would say to the people who have done that is, now's your chance. If you want to apologize and retract before you find yourself in court, you should probably do that now. Because if you don't do that, once you're in court, now you just can't leave. You won't be able to get out of it. And we're not going to name names because there's some other folks who are doing that, and we want to be better than that. And I want to emphasize this, right? We're not here to guess. We're not here to speculate. We're only going to deal in facts, right? And here's the most important thing, right? We don't know how Nolan Wells died. No one here is saying we know. But what we do know is Morgan, Jax, and Warren had nothing whatsoever to do with Nolan Wells' death.
Once again, being overly specific and giving away the game. Oh, if you lie about Morgan and Jax and Warren, we're gonna haul you into court. We don't know anything, but Morgan, Jax, and Warren are innocent. But I thought he drowned. Aren't they all innocent? Isn't it all just a terrible accident? Notice how not once has anybody in any of these interviews said that this was just a tragic accident. And mind you, if they were actually being defamed, those letters would have been sent out. They wouldn't go and give an interview warning people, you better retract it or then we're gonna come for you. As someone who has had several cease and desist letters sent to them, they don't warn you. Because cease and desist letters in themselves don't matter. They aren't anything. They are the warning. What was that weird fucking laugh they all had together?
Once you're in court, now you just can't leave. You won't be able to get out of it.
That was the mask slipping. That was them showing us who they really are. I've got a ton more I want to say about this interview so far, but I think it's important that we need to keep the pressure on because look at Warren is crumbling. He's literally wearing the same shirt that he wore in the last interview when they went to the island, and just look at the difference. Personally, I think it's important that if we are going to be giving Officer Tatum the views on these videos, that we need to be expressing our opinions in the comment section, not fighting with people. And I can't help but wonder why Warren's brother was left out of all of those proclamations. Just something to think about.
Take a breath. What you just watched was not a reaction video. It was a forensic audit. While Edward Pulsick was busy playing the role of a cinematic enforcer, quoting gangster films and laughing at the threat of a courtroom, independent investigators were doing something far more dangerous to the official narrative. They were paying attention to the details. They looked at the deck of the Triton. They looked at the shoreline of Horn Island. They looked at the wrists of the boys in the background. And when they adjusted the exposure on those images, the carefully constructed story of July 4th began to dissolve. Let's break down the 5 anomalies you just saw and apply them to the physical reality of this case. Because pixels are just data points until you connect them to the timeline. And when you connect them, the timeline doesn't just bend, it breaks. The first anomaly is the most fundamental, because it challenges the very foundation of the distress call. When the sea tow operator received the call from the Triton, she was told the bilge pump had failed, the boat was sinking. In the official interviews, the young men described a chaotic scene, but they were careful to clarify one specific detail. Nobody was on the floor of the boat. Nobody was scrambling around in the hull. But as the investigator pointed out, physics does not care about legal strategy. When you enhance the video of the boat being pulled by the tow strap, you see a violent jolt. The hull jerks. The water sloshes. And in that exact fraction of a second, a limb, a hand, or a foot flies up from the bottom of the deck. Someone was down there. If the boat was taking on water and someone was on the floor of the hull, they were either trying to save the vessel or they were already incapacitated. There is no third option. You do not lie on the floor of a sinking 22-foot boat in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico unless you are bailing water or you cannot stand up. And then, watch the faces of the young men in the interview when this exact moment is brought up. As the investigator noted, Warren stops breathing. He freezes. His eyes lock onto someone off camera, and he does not move until the sentence is closed out. That is not the body language of a traumatized friend recalling a mechanical failure. That is the body language of a witness, realizing that a piece of physical evidence has just contradicted his sworn statement. The video was quickly made ineligible for viewing on the platform. It was scrubbed. But the internet has a memory, and the frame-by-frame enhancement proves that the official narrative of the sinking boat is physically impossible. Which brings us to the second anomaly. Because if someone was on the floor of the Triton, we have to ask who else was on the water that day. And more importantly, we have to ask where they were when the sun went down. One of the most persistent claims in this case is that Nolan stayed behind on Horn Island to talk to a girl named Katie. The friends claim they left him on the beach, assuming he would catch a ride back with her group later. But when the investigator took the Snapchat photo Katie posted that day, the photo that supposedly shows her group on the water, and pumped up the exposure, the background told a different story. In the deep background of that photo, standing on the shoreline, is a figure wearing red shorts, lighter-colored hair, a familiar body type. Why does this matter? Because earlier that afternoon, a fight broke out on the shore of Horn Island, and according to Warren Hudson's own admission, his 17-year-old brother, Carter, was involved in that fight. Carter is not just a teenager. Carter trains in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and Warren admitted that during the altercation on the beach, Carter put someone in an armbar. If you do not know what an armbar looks like, the investigator laid it out perfectly. It is a grappling hold where the attacker hyperextends the elbow joint, requiring a very specific placement of the arms and the body weight. Now, look at the independent autopsy report. Look at the red discoloration on the back of Nolan's head. Look at the placement of the arms in the enhanced photo of the figure in the red shorts. The investigator is not saying this is definitive proof of a crime. A blurry, underexposed photo is not a smoking gun. But it is a digital breadcrumb that leads to a terrifying question. If Carter was on the shoreline in red shorts, and Warren grabbed his younger brother and brought him over to the Triton to chill out while the boat was allegedly sinking, was Carter on the Triton when it pulled away? Because if Carter was on the Triton at 4:30 p.m., and the figure in the red shorts is also visible in Katie's Snapchat photo at 6 p.m., the timeline collapses. You cannot be on a boat heading back to Ocean Springs at 4:30 and simultaneously be on a different boat with Katie at 6 o'clock. The geography of Horn Island does not allow for time travel. And if the timeline is fractured, we have to look at the other boats. We have to look at who was driving them. Which brings us to the third anomaly, the jewelry. Throughout the investigation, there has been a lingering mystery about a fourth boat. The official story involves the Triton, Katie's boat, and a vessel belonging to a young man named Bart. According to the friends, they called Bart that morning to ask him to come out to the island. But as the investigator pointed out, that story has never made sense. What 21-year-old does not already have plans for the 4th of July? When the investigator went back through the archived photos of Bart Jr., they were looking for a tattoo to identify a figure in one of the boat videos. But instead of the tattoo, they found something much more valuable, a bracelet. It is a highly unique, distinct set of armbands. And when you compare that bracelet to the wrist of the figure in the background of the boat video, the figure with the pronounced mullet, wearing what looks like jeans on a beach, the match is undeniable. But here is the problem. That figure is not on Bart's boat. The seating, the covers, the layout of the vessel in the video do not match Bart's boat. So if Bart Jr. was on a different boat, who was driving Bart's vessel? The investigator dug deeper into the family tree and found the answer. Bart has a younger brother. The family resemblance is striking, but the jawline is different. A square jaw that perfectly matches the unidentified driver on the Triton video. And his name is Brooks. Now, where have we heard that name before? In previous interviews, one of the friends casually mentioned a buddy named Brooks who was involved in the events of that day. A buddy who was brushed off, unnamed, and pushed to the periphery of the story. If Brooks was driving Bart's boat, and Bart Jr. was on a different vessel, the entire logistical map of July 4th changes. The boats were not operating independently. They were swapping passengers. They were moving between vessels. The neat, clean narrative of three separate groups doing three separate things is a fiction. They were a fleet, and they were huddled together. Which brings us to the fourth anomaly. Because when you have a fleet of boats, and a missing boy, and a fractured timeline, you hire a lawyer. And the lawyer you hire tells you exactly how to handle the public. When Edward Pulsick sat down beside Morgan Jackson Warren, he did not act like a criminal defense attorney. He acted like a warden. He wore the casual attire, the baseball cap advertising his law firm, and he issued the warnings. But as the investigator dissected, the most revealing moment of the entire broadcast was not what Pulsick said, it was what he didn't say. Over and over again, Pulsick repeated three names: Morgan, Jax, and Warren. If you lied about Morgan, if you lied about Jax, if you lied about Warren, we're going to get you. Morgan, Jax, and Warren left the island at 4:30. Morgan, Jax, and Warren had nothing to do with Nolan's death. In the legal world, specificity is a weapon. When an attorney repeats a specific list of names, they are drawing a circle around those individuals. They are telling the public and the prosecution exactly who is protected. But notice who is outside the circle. The other passengers. The other boats. The fourth vessel. And, most glaringly, Warren's own brother, Carter. If Pulsick represents the interest of the group, why is Carter excluded from every proclamation of innocence? Why is the brother who allegedly put someone in an armbar on the beach left out of the legal shield? An attorney who protects only three names is not defending a group. He is quietly telling you that everyone else is expendable. He is drawing a line around the clients with clean hands and leaving the rest to the mercy of the grand jury. And then came the threat. Once you're in court, now you just can't leave. Followed by the laugh. That brief, synchronized chuckle from the group was the mask slipping. It was the sound of young men who realize they have a high-priced bulldog in their corner, laughing at the idea of being held accountable. But as the investigator pointed out, real defamation does not work like this. A real cease and desist arrives in the mail. It does not arrive as a televised ultimatum. When a lawyer warns a faceless public to retract now, he is not building a case. He is building a wall of fear. Because if they actually had the evidence to exonerate themselves, they wouldn't need to threaten the internet. They would just show us the tape. This brings us to the final, most devastating anomaly, the one that renders every other argument moot. Jax Patolo's grandparents own the house in Ocean Springs where the group gathered before heading to the water. It is the same house they returned to after leaving Nolan on the island. That house has security cameras. Those cameras should show exactly what time the boats arrived. They should show who stepped off them. They should show the condition of the young men when they walked through the door. They should show whether Nolan's phone and keys were in the house hours before the parents were told he was missing. But the footage has never been released. Instead, we are given a theatrical performance about race. We are told that questioning the timeline is an attack on their character. We are told that the media is making it racist. We are told that a friend was denied a Gatorade at a corner store, and we are supposed to feel sorry for them. As the investigator said in the final clip, "Nobody feels bad that you can't buy a Gatorade. Nolan is dead." If you are innocent, the security camera footage is your salvation. It is the single piece of evidence that proves you came home alone. It proves you didn't tamper with the phone. It proves you didn't hide the keys. So why is it still locked in a hard drive? Why did the grandfather cancel the private tow? Why did the boys wait until 11 p.m. to call Christine Wansley? Why did they tell her Nolan was wearing black shorts when the photos show him in blue-gray? Why did they hide the keys on top of the Xbox until a phone call forced them to produce them? Every single one of these questions has a digital answer. The answers are in the Life 360 data. The answers are in the Snapchat timestamps. The answers are in the exposure-adjusted pixels of a background figure in red shorts. The answers are in the security feed of a house in Ocean Springs. But the people who hold those answers have chosen to give us mob movie quotes instead. Attorneys can spin. Publicists can pivot. Young men can freeze on camera and look to their handlers for permission to breathe. But pixels do not lie. A bracelet on a wrist is a fact. A red short on a shoreline is a fact. A limb flying up from the deck of a sinking boat is a fact. A brother named Brooks driving a boat that wasn't his is a fact. The Jackson County Sheriff's Office may be satisfied with a two-word finding. The state of Mississippi may be content to seal an autopsy and call it procedure, but the independent investigators who downloaded those files, who adjusted that exposure, who tracked that jewelry, they have ensured that the digital crime scene remains open. Nolan Wells was 18 years old. He cooked salmon for his mother. He didn't drive, so his friends picked him up. And on the 4th of July, he got on a boat with a fleet of vessels that swapped passengers, hid keys, and scrubbed videos. The lawyers can threaten the internet all they want. They can quote their movies and laugh at the cameras. But eventually, the grand jury will convene. The subpoenas will fly. The hard drives will be seized. And when the exposure is finally pumped up on the whole truth, there will be nowhere left to hide. We will be here when the digital forensics are entered into evidence. We will be here when the security footage is finally played. Most channels will not be. After watching the OSINT breakdown, which detail stood out to you the most? The armbar matching the mark on his head, the bracelet identifying Brooks, or the missing security footage from the grandparents' house? Drop your theory below. If you want coverage that respects the evidence and honors the families, subscribe to the Black Docket and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. And before you click away, do me a favor. Drop a comment below and tell us exactly where you are watching from today. We're building a global watch room here, and I want to see how far this community reaches. Drop your city, state, or country below. Until next time, stay safe, and we'll keep watching.